Welcome to the Hospitality Maverick podcast with me, Michael Tingsare. We at Hospitality Mavericks are here to inspire leaders to create heart-centered and profitable businesses from the inside out, the kind that both employees and customers love and support. Thanks to BizSimply for sponsoring this episode as our show partner. And BizSimply is the all-in-one HR, workforce management, rota and operations software designed and built by hospitality experts to make every shift run like clockwork. And we join forces to help the industry to find new ways to become even more innovative in how we lead our people, how we operate, to how we grow our businesses, to how we serve our customers. Together we want to share strategies and tools that can make the industry thrive long term, not just survive.
You don't have a culture if you don't have the people, right? So people create a culture. And if you think simply in that way, that the better the people feel, the more effective, efficient, productive your culture is going to be. If we want a positive culture, we need positivity within the people. And that's partly to do with people's mindset and mental health, but it's also partly to do with people's relationships and how they feel about their work. So investing in people and happiness is absolutely paramount.
This is Dr. Vikki Barnes, which is the founder of Positive Wellbeing. She is a very experienced mental health and well-being consultant and specialist in positive psychologist. She has worked with some incredible organizations over the years, including the NHS, Virgin, Nestle, and many others. And it's always a great pleasure to have guests back on the show. And last time Vikki was on the show were in the early days of the pandemic, where we discussed how we practice radical transparency. And if you have not listened to that conversation yet, I would advise you now to on your feed to find episode number 62. A lot have happened since last conversation, and Vikki also been up to a lot. She has become an author of an amazing book they call Free Happiness. I advise you to get your copy and read it here for the new year. We take a deep dive into the book, and especially we talk about acceptance, courage, and flow, and how the book can be used as a tool to improve happiness on a day-to-day level. We also talk about Vikki's future work, which also would involve how we can make sure that our planet can thrive and survive in centuries to come. Before you tune in, please sign up for a weekly newsletter, Maverick Talk, via hospitalitymavericks.com. Here, you will find much more insights into what Maverick leaders know and do, and you will never miss an episode. Now, grab your notebook. There's lots of great advice on how to improve your inner work and at the same time save our planet. Enjoy. So today I'm really excited because there's nothing better when guests wants to come back, and especially guest that has a lot to contribute with. And today's guest, Dr. Vikki Barnes, we're on in the, I think it was like after the first lockdown of the pandemic, and we were talking about leading with radical acceptance. Accepting the situation you're in will actually make you start moving forward. And since then, a lot has happened, and I'm so excited, Vikki, for you to be back. So thank you so much for coming on today.
You're welcome. It's exciting for me too, Michael. Thanks so much for the invite.
Yeah, and this time you're also coming back, and you talked about the book, and we will go into the book as we talk about free happiness that exactly came to fruition. It's here, the book, and out there and helping a lot of people, which is really, really interesting. So today the vision, as we had talked about, is like how can we actually help people in this moment of time we're in. But before we start, and for people that hasn't listened to episode 62 yet, that will probably after this one go back and listen to that, can you just give a little background about you and and what's happened since we connected last time?
Of course, happy to. So in terms of background, well, I'm a clinical psychologist by profession, and all of my life I've been interested in people, and I wasn't particularly great at school, but one of my skills was to build good relationships with friends, and I was always one of those people that people wanted to talk to and open up to, and I like helping people feel better. So that positivity and happiness thread was just throughout, really. And then I traveled a bit with university. I studied my second year over in Texas at University of North Texas, which was really good fun, which gave me this love of travel and meeting people from all over the world and different cultures with different views of the world and different backgrounds and different experiences, and how we understand each other better, and diversity and all of that lovely stuff. And moved around a lot with work as well. In order to become a clinical psychologist, you've got to put the graft in and go wherever you can go to get the assistant jobs and all the experience. And actually, my first attempt at getting onto the clinical psychology doctorate was a very polite refusal from them, because I didn't have a wide enough academic background, and this was after getting a bachelor's degree. So I went and did a master's in neuropsychology because I was really interested in the brain and how that works, because whilst people are all very different, we've got this a really scientific model inside of our heads that it's really good to understand. So I did that, and then finally got accepted onto the clinical psychology doctorate at Exeter Uni, which is in the southwest of England, and it's a beautiful place. And then I got really interested in the outdoors and nature and wildlife and the environment a bit more, because I'm by the sea and it's just beautiful by the moors and things like that. So I worked a long time when I qualified in the NHS. I worked for about 10 years. I also worked for the Virgin Group, so a very different experience there. And then I had probably the most difficult experience in my life, where my life was headed in one direction with work, with love, with home and health. And then all of a sudden, in the space of just a couple of months, everything went in the opposite direction. And I wasn't going forwards. I was going into, I didn't know where I was going with any of it. And all four of those things just radically changed. That was my moment of radical acceptance. I will be honest, I wasn't initially radically accepting any of those things, but as a process, I started to radically accept and then came through it, obviously. And then what happened out of that were a few wonderful things, one of which is creating and setting up my own business, which is called Positive Wellbeing, which is an organizational wellness consultancy working globally with lots of lovely clients around the world. And now I'm getting more interested in the kind of environmental planet health side of things as well. So it's all about people and planet, which I know you're also really, really passionate about. So the business is going in a slightly different direction. I'm trying to give the people what they want, which is now more about conservation and sustainability, which I'm really passionate about. So doing that in organizations alongside working with people and their own mental health. You very kindly just mentioned the book, which is one of my toolkits, Michael. So I worked tirelessly for a year on that, and then 7 months to publish it. So yeah, I'm really glad that that's out there, helping people in the way that it was intended to.
Yeah, and I guess, like, one of the things I think that's really interesting, I followed you, and instead of maybe make it to a question, you can maybe just confirm that what if you go and follow Vikki, she actually practices in real life. You're actually trying to document it through your social media and so on. Actually, and you just told me before when this call, you just been sitting out and getting as much sunlight as possible. And I was talking about I've been out for a walk, and and you're really utilizing the techniques there's in your book, the toolkit, in a way to so actually was it more for yourself you're writing the book, or was it for others? So, because that's always interesting, because there's some really, really personal experiences in this book as well.
Yeah, well, that's a really good question, actually, because when I never intended to write a book, I never wanted to be an author. It wasn't one of my aspirations. But when I was speaking at conferences around the world, very fortunately, people were always asking me, "Can I buy your book? Can I buy your book?" And I didn't have one. So again, it's giving the people what they want and thinking, okay, maybe there's a market here. But did I write it for myself or others? Well, I started writing it to help others. However, when I thought about the kind of book that I wanted it to be, the answer was really clearly, it's the kind of book I would want to read. So it was kind of for myself in that sense, because I couldn't write a book that I didn't feel wholeheartedly in tune with, agree with. There's nothing in there that I don't believe in fully. as you've just said, you're right. All of the techniques I practice, I don't always get it right. I get it wrong a lot of the time. I'm not always happy. I'm not always positive. This is a bit of a something that people misunderstand about positive psychologists and happiness specialists. We're not all always like that all the time. But what we do have is this toolkit that we believe in and we practice, and that's definitely something that I do. So yeah, all the chapters are broken down into things that I think are genuinely really useful for most people, no matter where along that mental health spectrum you are, whether you're feeling really well and you just want to stay well, or whether you're actually feeling quite gloomy and you need a pick me up. It's for everybody across the board, because it's not rocket science. It's everyday stuff that's really effective and easy and accessible, hopefully.
Yeah, we'll come back in a moment because I've chosen three chapters or areas of the book. I thought those would be really interesting from some of the feedback I get from what I hear, what the audience is talking about, and we're going to come back in a moment, like, and what they are struggling with, and how they maybe we can elaborate a bit on that, and you can maybe put some example on. Before we get to that, it was also be good to hear, in your work with clients, just like what does a happiness consultant or positive psychologist help companies with? What is it they're doing? Are they going in to do a pep talk? And what exactly are you doing when you go out there? There's probably some leaders out there that are thinking, well, how is that relevant?
Yeah, of course. Well, sometimes I do get asked to go and do a pep talk. That's definitely within my service list. So basically, what it is, I mean, if you think about any company culture, you don't have a culture if you don't have the people, right? So people create a culture. And if you think simply in that way, that the better the people feel, the more effective, efficient, productive your culture is going to be. If we want a positive culture, we need positivity within the people. And that's partly to do with people's mindset and mental health, but it's also partly to do with people's relationships and how they feel about their work. So investing in people and happiness is absolutely paramount, I think, because human beings basically want a few things. They want, this is above and beyond all your basic needs like food and water and shelter, of course, but they basically want to be heard, they want to be understood, and they want to be happy. I don't think there's a person on the planet that wouldn't agree that actually happiness is really quite important. Now, people have different views on the word happiness, and some people like to call it being content or calm or whatever words you like to use. But that feeling that when you feel like, okay, life is good, I'm good, I'm okay. I call it happiness. You can call it what you like, but if we focus on that within our organizations as leaders and we foster that in our people, we are going to see the results in our culture. We're going to see things like um, better, increased, improved metrics and improved customer and client and colleague satisfaction surveys. We're going to be hitting targets more. So all of those hard results that businesses need to survive, you're going to get that from the soft skills, which is focusing on happiness for your people.
What typical transformation do you then, see or help facilitate when you go into businesses? What is it like? That's probably not a typical use case because cultural challenges or blockers is very different from organization to organization. But like, how do you normally come in, and what happens when you've been involved for some time?
So usually I get asked to either do a one-off talk, so it might be a speaking event at CPD, conference, team away day, whatever it might be. And then people get really inspired by it, which is lovely. We normally have a really good time. Happiness is a really good topic to talk about. It's really positive, it's really proactive, it's energizing. And then what happens is people see the value in it because then people are talking about it. They're using the same language, and there's always a toolkit at the end of it. There's always something that people can go and continue to do and keep that energy going. So from that, normally what happens is then organizations will come back to me and ask for one of my programs. So I've got various programs, and they're longer term. So they can be, depending on how often I work with an organization, it can be a few weeks to a few months to a year or more. And that is to really embed all of the positive psychology practices into the team slash organization through the most influential people. And the influential people don't necessarily have to be managers and leaders, but it's a group of people who are going to take this forwards because they're genuinely really quite keen to do it and quite motivated and on board. So yeah, there's one-off speaking events, there's programs, there are workshop series. I do all kinds of things. One-to-one coaching happens within the program normally, so I'll work with a few people. There might be a focus group with a specific group of people who are going to implement it even more widely, like a happiness snowball effect in company or organization. So yeah, lots of different things. And the book is actually for sale as a package as well. So I know that you'll allow me later to offer my website and things like that. But on the website, there's a book packages page, and if companies often buy a bulk order of the book, and then they'll get a bit of my time alongside that package, which might be a one-to-one, it might be a group workshop, or it could be something larger than that, like an away day. So, and that's all very focused around some of the topics in the book as well, which, as I say, are just really important for humans and cultures.
Yeah, and then it's like you're very like around when you talk about it, and when you it's like giving people tools. It's not just about giving them the concepts. You're actually trying to give them tools as well, which I think is really really interesting, because often any kind of cultural thing becomes actually a lot of talk and no tools, and therefore nothing happens on again, and you're maybe not going to achieve what you want to achieve. What is if we start looking into the book now, and we talked about radical acceptance last time, and in the book you talk about acceptance, and I guess there's some, yeah, and everything is connected also when you read this book, and I think everybody should go and buy this book, because what I said to Vikki before we start, actually, I talked a lot about meditation by Marcus Aurelius, or obstacle is the way by Ryan Holiday. Actually, this is just a different way and take and understanding it. Actually, it's good to see if there's something you believe in that works for you. Actually, see it in different formats. Actually, and I read a book actually some months ago. I reread Dalai Lama's How to Have a Happy Life. And he will also again reinforce these things. And the funny thing is that actually we have all the tools we need to have a better life. We just don't use them. So if we go into the first one, coming back to that, acceptance. What is that about, Vikki? And why is it important to accept things? Because it's unfair sometimes. Why is this happening to me? It could be a change that's coming. It could be personal stuff. And we all know when we enter that thing, it's not fair. I have to deal with this.
Yeah, that comes also to values. So if people who have a strong fairness value, as I do, will feel that very strongly, that this isn't fair. I don't, we don't, they don't deserve this, that kind of thought process around it. And that's really tough, because the response to that normally is life isn't fair, and it's not, but if you've got strong value in that direction, then it's kind of unhelpful to just think, well, life isn't fair. What's more helpful is to practice acceptance, and acceptance for me is really around going through whatever emotions you're going through and not trying to stop anything. So you're not trying to block anything. So it's not, acceptance isn't around, oh yeah, just be happy with the situation. It's not really that. It's a bit different to that. If you're unhappy with the situation, or whatever the feeling might be, no matter how negative it feels to have that emotion, it's allowing it. And I see emotions and life almost like you've got this stage, and all your emotions are actors and actresses, and they're all playing a part, and you've got to let each of them have a bit of the limelight. So if sadness comes in, or regret, or guilt, or shame, or annoyance, or frustration, or anger, and a lot of the emotions that people don't want to have, anxiety, the feelings that people don't want to have and we try to push away, if you just let that emotion have the limelight, shine the light on it, give it some stage time, but be aware of that, and don't give it too much stage time. Don't let it take over the whole show, because you've got all these other wonderful emotions like excitement and joy and love, and all of this nice stuff that you actually want to feel. We want to feel more of that because it's nicer for us. It's more pleasant. But you've got to let every emotion shine, because it's got a message for you. There's a reason that it's there. And if you don't do that, you're just pushing it behind the curtain, and it's then going to start to kind of punch through the walls and start to fight with the other emotions, and it wants its center stage for a while. So I think that acceptance to me is more around, you've got all these characters in your life, they are going to be there, and I I always say that two of the most amazing things in the world are people and technology, but they're also two of the most stressful things. So technology and people can bring stress into your life, but your role as you've got your own character in your film show or your movie, which is your life. You are also a character in that. So what are you going to do? How are you going to react to that? You've got all this other stuff going on. You can't control any of it, really. You can only control yourself. So having that, for me, that analogy is really helpful. It depends how your mind works, but that kind of stage and your character's analogy, whereby you are you're not in control of how they're all doing at any one time, but you're in control of how much of the stage presence you give to them. I don't know whether that makes any sense, because it's just the way my mind works, but to me that's acceptance.
Yeah, it's interesting you say as well, as like there's something you struggle with, give it some space just to play out a little bit, then also step away from it and get perspective on it and actually say that, especially if you feel somebody is not playing a fair game, they are stepping on your values, it could be a work situation. Actually, the best thing you can do is to accept that's the way they have decided to operate, but that doesn't mean that I need to operate that way. And it's not taking anything away from me. Besides, it's actually fueling my anger, and actually it's not helping me. So it's actually accepting that situation, which I think it's quite powerful, and it's actually not that difficult if you actually. I think I read somewhere in a book. Which book was it? I can't remember. But it's talked about. There was one about the Stoics, about actually the Stoics' ability to zoom out from the situation and accept it, and spend a bit of time of doing that. And you will find out it's just a little bit of thing of all the nice things there's in the world. And you don't have to deal with it. And sometimes you need to deal with it, and you have to accept I have to deal with it. But you don't have to get involved mentally. I really liked your analogy of just let it flow a bit and without taking over. Because I think there's so many things flowing around right now. You could easily be taken over by negative emotion as well, I guess.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that you talk about Stoicism, and I know that you've done a lot more reading and research into that than me. But we were talking, weren't we, when we were just having a chat before about how that's related to a lot of the things that I talk about, and I think one thing that's just come up for me there, which is also really helpful for me, is I do get quite overwhelmed with things, because I'm quite a sensitive type naturally. My temperament is to take things in and to notice things, and whether it's about people or the environment, and I get quite affected by people who are upset, animals, whatever it might be. So I take a lot in. But then when you've got a lot of stuff going on in your own life as well, and you've got your own business and your own house or whatever it might be, and you've just got to keep going, sometimes I think, okay, I'm overwhelmed with all of these, whether it's options or tasks or problems or whatever it might be. And sometimes it's good to just, as you just said about Stoicism, always helicopter above it and just let everything land, or throw it all up in the air, however you want to look at it, and just see what bubbles back up to the surface. If you kind of just leave it for a while and just step away, take a step back, and rather than zooming right in and trying to get in, can't see the wood through the trees, and trying to sort everything out, zoom out and just see what actually bubbles up. And those things that bubble up might be the things that you need to focus on. And sometimes, quite often, a lot of the other stuff, which you could have wasted so much time and energy on, just dissipates, and it disappears, and it sorts itself out. We can get so caught up and tangled with trying to deal with all of our problems and the world's problems, and actually sometimes just having that reflective time and thinking, okay, I'm not in control of all of this, and just really allowing the important stuff to take, going back to the stage analogy, to take center stage, and just dealing with that can be really, really good for our mental health and our physical health as well, because we're calming our system, and we're relaxing everything a little bit and not taking the world onto our shoulders, which a lot of us can quite easily do.
Yeah, and especially in the world we live in now, where there's so much going on. And I think I want to take us on to the next thing. You write a chapter around courage, and you need to, when you have the ability to do something that frightens you, you write in the book. And I guess a lot of people, a lot of leaders is out there now standing in front of lots of challenges. There's lots of demands. After we thought the pandemic was tough, I said that before we started out as we were chatting as well. But I think a lot of leaders, especially in this show, there's in this sector, really feels the pressure now and finding the courage to move on. Can you talk a bit about courage and maybe connect it a bit about to the world we're in now and the leadership challenge within that?
Yeah, well, I think we've all been really brave to just get through this. There's been so much that's happened in the past few years, if you look at it. But actually, some of it we're looking back at. And whenever we're looking back at something, we've come through it, right? So we've been really courageous already. So we've all got that. Anybody who's here today is already so courageous. And it might not always feel like that. But I think, again, it's zooming out a little bit and thinking about it in a bit more of a reflective way. And what is courage? And I think it's really important to recognize that we're only given one life, right? Maybe, who knows, we might be back. But as far as we know, we're here right now, and this is it for us right now. So if you've been given this one life, what are you going to do? Are you going to be safe, be a bystander, and kind of watch your life safely pass by and just make sure you don't step outside those lines, don't do anything outside your comfort zone, don't step outside the box, don't have a voice unless you know that it won't, go in the wrong way? Or are you going to actually perform in your life? And are you going to get right in there, get stuck in, get your hands dirty, get your feet wet, say what you want to say, have a voice, be heard, be really authentic is the word, and vulnerable as well. I mean, you'll know that I talk a heck of a lot about vulnerability, and one of my programs is all about vulnerability, and vulnerable leadership is something that I get asked to do a lot in organizations that you would not expect to be asking me to talk about vulnerability, believe me, but people want it because that's how we live our most authentic life, by actually being vulnerable. And people see vulnerability as a weakness, but it isn't. I think it's actually our strength. It's how can it be a weakness if it takes so much courage to show vulnerability? Like that, to me, if you think about that for a second, it doesn't make any sense that vulnerability is a weakness when it's so takes so much strength to go there and be vulnerable. So it's a strength, it's a courageous act, vulnerability. So I don't see those, and I write this in the book as well, I don't see vulnerability and courage as opposites. A lot of people see we're either brave or we are vulnerable, and it's like one happens or the other happens. But I see them as sitting right next to each other. If we are vulnerable, then we are brave. To be vulnerable is to be brave, and the most courageous things we can do in our lives will often be the scariest. They'll be the things that we might well fail at. They'll be the things that we're really worried about. They'll be the things that cause that fire and a little bit of butterflies in our tummy, but they'll be the things with the biggest rewards, and they'll be the things that we look back on our lives and think, I'm so glad that I went for that and I did that and I had the courage to do so, because that's me really performing in my own show. And it's back to the movie of my life. I had no intention to talk about being on stage in a movie. Who knows where this is going to lead? I don't know. But it seems to keep coming back to that for me. That's, are we going to be the protagonist? Are we going to be the lead? Are we going to be the star? Or are we just going to sit in the audience and watch our lives as it goes by?
Yeah, we're gonna be the hero, the mentor. That's also in the Story Wars line. It's so interesting, because like lots of leaders think courage is to just to crack on, deal with it hard handed, and then you start to talk about vulnerability and actually, saying, hey, actually, I'm not okay, or I actually need some help. And actually, I've seen and I work with people, very senior people, actually do that during the pandemic to their teams, and the impact it had positively. That was not like they were actually relieved that person actually felt like that, because they actually, by that, she or he would give permission to be vulnerable. And I think that's having the courage to do that also now, as things just feels like it's gonna get a bit tighter, and everybody talk about next year is gonna be a very difficult year. Have that in mind. It's okay to say, yeah, I don't always have the answer, and yeah, I'm also struggling. I find it hard to find the balance or whatever it is, because it is hard to find balance and have the perfect life. It's impossible.
Yeah, and I think also leaders, because of the nature of the role that they have, and they have an accountability and responsibility for people in their teams. They often say to me that they're scared of opening the can of worms and being vulnerable or talking about vulnerability or opening up the conversation about mental health because they don't want to open a can of worms and they don't know how to deal with what they might get. But my response to that is always, well, the can of worms is there. Whether you open it or not is up to you. You either open it now or it's going to burst open later on. So, but you're not, you can't hide what's there. It's there, and putting it again onto the stage and out there into whether it's a conversation or whatever it is. You're actually just giving it enough light to shine on it. When you shine a light on something, it just exposes it to the point where it's then dealt with, and it's a lot easier to do that. And I think that everybody that I've worked with, without fail, I've never had anybody come back to me and say, "Oh, I'm really disappointed and I regret talking about vulnerable leadership." It just doesn't happen. People say, "Wow, what a change in the team! Wow, we've really come together. We really support each other now. Oh my word, my culture's just burst into this really positive, communicative, effective workforce," and things like that. And at the end of the day, vulnerability is a human trait that we all have. So why hide it? It's there as much as where you're from, where you were born, who brought you up. These are just things about humans. Vulnerability is a human trait. Like, we all want to be happy. We all have emotions. We all have vulnerability. That's just the way it is. So shying away from it is kind of really counterproductive, actually. And moving into it as what people tend to feel like they've benefited from in terms of relationships, and really moving a culture forward to a positive and psychologically safe environment, which we know is really important in teams.
Yeah, and especially, as we are hitting more shaky world for businesses in the next coming years, or already now for the audience of this, the people are holding on, and actually, vulnerability is actually maybe a way to face that and actually deal with that and actually come through these hard times. Then I also wanted to talk with you about flow, because that's something I'm very obsessed about myself, because we talked about before we started talking about we need to accept the situation. It is what it is. This is what you've been giving. You need to get the best out of it. And sometimes also just let it go. Don't try to work it or fight it. And then we talked about the courage to do things you didn't think you want to. And then we ended up in vulnerability. But then also flow. I feel like really what kept me going through the pandemic was actually I found out where my impact zone, I call it, but the flow is a great philosophy around that as well. Like, how do you actually make sure that you put yourself in that zone at least 80% of the time a day? And that's ambitious, because some days, as you said, some days I'm only 30%, and some days I'm 60, and some days I'm 70%. So talk to us a bit about flow and what your ideas around the concept and why it is so important to be aware of this.
I'll start with one of the things that gets in the way of flow for most of us. Because we are these wonderfully evolved human beings with these huge frontal lobes, which do a lot of thinking all of the time. We are obsessed with thinking, and we don't even mean to, but we're constantly weighing things up, thinking about the pros and cons, evaluating, analysing, supposing, presuming. We are judging. We're constantly doing all of this stuff. And I think that we're doing it more now because of the rise in social media. So we've got a lot to compare ourselves to. And is my life as good as it should be? Have I got what I want? Am I where I'm supposed to be? And everybody else seems better off, and all of that stuff. And how many followers do I have? And all of this stuff. Really, is it important? Depending on what you do, it may well be. But for most of us, is it really the important thing? And I think that all of this and notifications popping up all the time, it gets in the way of flow, because we get too entrenched into our thoughts, and we're always coming back to this frontal lobe kind of mechanism thinking. So what the barrier to flow is often, I don't want to say overthinking, because we're humans and we're thinking all the time, but I suppose thinking in the wrong kinds of ways. Or unhelpful kinds of ways. So the best thing about flow is that when you're really in it, you're in the zone, you're really engrossed in one thing, you're completely immersed in it, and you're not really thinking about anything else. So you're still thinking, but you're just on task, or it might be a hobby. So this could be work or personal life, right? So flow at work might be that you're really immersed in a task that you're really enjoying, and flow in your personal life might be a hobby or activity that you do once or twice a week or whatever it might be. It could be a conversation with somebody. If we're in flow now, Michael, it means that we're not thinking about, oh, what was that thing that happened earlier that really annoyed me, or what am I going to have for my tea tonight, or anything like that. We're just thinking about the conversation, the really interesting topics that we're talking about, because we're really in the zone. The great thing about flow is what you're doing is you're giving a lot of your brain a break, because you're utilizing just specific parts which are being really mindful. And we know through all the research on mindfulness how important that is to our health. So I don't need to talk about that. I'm sure everybody's aware of how beneficial mindfulness is now. But flow is, so it's really bringing in those mindfulness centers. It's really creating a kind of a zone whereby we're not utilizing all of our brains all of the time. We're giving a lot of it a rest. And we need to do that just in the way that we need to give our bodies a rest. Our brains, our poor overworked brains need a rest from all of that thinking too. And getting into a state of flow is one of the best ways to do that.
And you also talk in the book about, I think this is really important as well, as also we also built to be used, like to get in flow, we need to go and use and not just think about it. We actually need to go and do things, but also it means like to regenerate, go out in nature for walks or whatever, actually connect ourselves with things and actually use our bodies as well, because we sit down a lot. And I think also that I think sometimes that also maybe also help. That's my assumption, is that to overthink things, because you are literally sitting down and the only thing you do when you sit down is thinking. But actually when you're moving around, you actually think better, like, and go for a walk around lunchtime. There's lots of problems there was in the morning. Suddenly they just disappear, or you know exactly what to go and do or what to say in that situation.
Yeah, and one of my the best time for me to be creative. It's quite unfortunate, really, Michael, but I've found a way around it, because us positive psychologists do that, of course. But one of my most creative moments is right before I'm about to fall asleep. So I have some of my best ideas just as I'm about to fall asleep, and the reason for that is my brain it's closing off all of the thoughts that go on the rest of the day. So it's given this moment to shine and be really creative. The downside is I then have to get up and write it down. Otherwise, I'm going to forget it, because I'm about to go to sleep. I love sleep. So I really don't want to get in the way of falling asleep. But if I don't write things down, then I have to. But I've got this method now where I've got a notepad and pen right next to my bed, and I have it open on a clean page. So I don't even have to turn the light on. I just scribble. I make sure I'm on the page, I'm not on my table, and I just scribble. And in the morning, I can decipher the notes. Or I've got another mental imagery technique that I use, whereby I've got a box of things, and as long as there are only 3 or 4 things in there, I can remember them when I open the box in the morning in my mind's eye. So that's the way around that. But the point is that I'm kind of in a flow state when I'm getting into bed, because I'm very good at not having screens in the bedroom, and everything's about going to sleep. So it's a very relaxing environment. So I'm getting into flow because I'm being mindful, I'm breathing deeply, and I'm calming down and increasing parasympathetic nervous system activity and all that lovely stuff, and getting into a state of flow. And that's when my brain goes into its really great creativity mode. So if we can do that in the daytime by, as you say, getting out, walking in nature, being in the trees or whatever it might be, and getting away from too much thinking, then we can really give our brain space to have the best ideas that it's going to have.
Yeah, and that's what flow is all about, actually finding out what your perfect flow situation is. What is like one of the most pressing issue you would like to see moving on from the conversation in the book, but what is like the pressing issue you would like to see solved in this world with your maybe happiness hat on?
Well, I would like some countries and cultures are doing this already, but I would like happiness to be used as a measure for um, cultures and countries. So, and a bit like we've got GDP, so gross domestic product is all about how successful is a country based on money, basically. So it's a very financial approach. But I think that happiness should be right in there, and in some countries it is. So a lot of countries are now looking at the Wellbeing Index, a happiness index, and I love that, and I would like that to be a global thing, because it matters, it's meaningful, it has a huge impact, and it works, and it'll affect everything. So actually how successful we are in general, and it goes back to what I said before about soft skills leading to hard results in organizations. It's the same for a community, a society, a country, and an economy. I'm a member of the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, which is kind of a global collaboration of people who are just really passionate about this. And if we look at well-being as an economy, we really change the way that we view things, the way that cities are built, the way that community spaces are generated, inclusivity, understanding and accepting difference in people and what we all need, looking after wildlife, nature, and the environment, and back to planet health, as I talked about before. So all of that is kind of encompassed in this well-being economy framework, which I absolutely love. So for me, that would be an amazing world if we can. We're making steps, big steps, but it takes a long time to change a culture, as you know. So that would be my top thing, I think.
Challenging the existing model where it's just built on, in principle, capitalism, financial success, and actually, weave in, wellness, and it gives totally good sense, because if we are better taking care of ourselves, we also will be more conscious about what we do with other things, because like consciousness doesn't just come from heaven. It's actually something you work on, because you can manage yourself and you feel that I have a happy life, I'm okay, as you said at the beginning. What is it that you're most excited about right now, Vikki? Of all the things you're working on, what is like something that really make you excited? You made a little open the door into talking about how do we actually connect happiness and the planet. Is that one of the things you're really excited about?
That is the thing I'm really excited about. Yes, exactly that. It's something that I've been working on for years now, but it's finally become my focus. So yeah, I'm really excited about making new connections. I'm already talking with quite a few people about going overseas next year and doing some work from a range of things really, but I've done some humanitarian support work in the past, as we've talked about, I think last time, when I went over to the British Virgin Islands and helped after Hurricane Irma with their mental health support. So there's a bit of that, and lots of countries need more support with that. But there's also lots of leadership support that needs to happen around the world as well, especially in more kind of developing areas. And I'm really interested in wildlife conservation. I love animals and wildlife, and in my job, there's not a direct link to that. So I'm really excited to do more volunteer work around that. But then my learnings around the volunteer work that I'm going to be doing in that space will bring in conservation and sustainability ideas, so that I can then weave those into my programs, which I'm starting to do already. And one of my programs being Sustainable Happiness, which is all about how do we look after ourselves at the same time as looking after our environment, nature, and the world. And those two things are absolutely hand in hand. And I would like nothing more than to see a world whereby people are more side by side with nature and wildlife. And in some communities in the world, they've got that. They've absolutely got that, and they're actually some of the happiest communities. So it's really important that we do that, I think. So that's one of my most exciting projects at the moment.
2 more questions, Vikki. The book you will give away 9 out of 10 times, and it's not your own. Which book is that?
I always go to Brené Brown. So 9 out of 10 times it would be Brené Brown, and it would be any of her books really. But I have actually returned to, because I do read her work a lot, Daring Greatly, which is a lot about leadership as well as life in general. But it's all about what I said before, really putting yourself out there and not just being the bystander of your life, but actually getting in there and doing life. So Brené Brown.
That's a very good example. I'm just reading Atlas of the Heart, I think it's called. It's one of the 5 books. I read more than 5 books at a time, and it's just because I like to flip in and out of them. That's how my brain works. But that's one of them, and it's a really, really fascinating book as well from Brené Brown. That's a really good one. So is there one question you wished I've asked you, but I didn't? And what would that question be? And what would you have answered?
Crikey, I don't think anybody's ever asked me that question before. I think it's probably a question that we should all be asking each other a bit more often, which is, well, it's a 2-part question, if I may. One is, how are you? How are you? How are you really? How are you really? And what do you need? I'm always telling people to ask these 2 questions. So yeah, if you'd asked me those, then I'd be very grateful. And I'm giving you my answer, am I, as well?
Yeah.
So how am I? I am a little bit scared of the project that I've given myself, which I talked about just now. And I mean scared because I put my all into everything that I do, and anybody that knows me knows that I'm a very determined person slash stubborn. But I like to think of it as perseverance. And I really want to do this, but I'm scared that it won't be that straightforward, and it hasn't been so far. So there's been a lot of brick walls already, believe me. So I'm scared that I'll what's that F word that we all hate, which is fail. And then there's a whole chapter in the book on failure, so I'll need to remind myself of my own and make sure that I do that. But yes, I'm kind of scared of it going a bit off course and taking me in a lot of scary directions that I haven't anticipated. And what do I need? The second part of the question. I just need. So I probably need contacts at this stage, don't I? I'm making contact with lots of different people in the space of wildlife conservation, environmental sustainability. So yeah, if anybody's listening, then they'd like a volunteer or a collaborator, or to have chat about how this might work in the wellness space, then yeah, that would be amazing. Get in touch.
Great. Anyone out there, reach out to me so I can put you in contact with Vikki, or she will give you details in a second. She can you can reach out to her herself. She's also on LinkedIn, I know. So that leads us to where can we find you, and how do we connect with you?
Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Michael. So my website has got all of my social media links on there and my email to get in touch. And that is www.drvikkibarnes.com. Vikki is spelled Vikki, Barnes is Barnes. And yeah, there's my LinkedIn, which is Dr. Vikki Barnes, Twitter and Instagram. And yeah, there's a contact page on there as well. So lots of information about the things we've been talking about today, including the book and my services. So I'd be happy to be contacted.
Well, with your own word, thank you very much for coming. And I'm sending you then courage to do the thing you need to do.
Bless you, Michael. I appreciate that so much. Thank you.
I really appreciate that you're listening in. So if you enjoyed today's conversation, please share with others, rate or give a review, or subscribe to one of our channels, which all can be done via the website hospitalitymavericks.com. I believe that reading the right books is the key to become a better leader. So I've helped you with a curated list of some of the best books to improve yourself, others, and the organization. Find them on hospitalitymavericks.com. A big thank you to BizSimply for supporting us, bringing great insights, strategies, and tools to help leaders to become better every day. Check them out at bizsimply.com or on their socials at BizSimply or BizSimplyHQ. You can also email them directly at podcast@bizsimply.com. Thank you to Fina Charlson, who is the show producer from the podcast Collective. If you have any ideas and feedback for the show or other thoughts, reach out to me via LinkedIn or via my email, michael@hospitalitymavericks.com. I'm Michael Tinkser, and you've been listening to the Hospitality Maverick podcast show. Be Maverick.